Good, thank you. It is a great pleasure for me to be here with you today for the Fall Forum on Teaching and Learning, focusing this year on civic engagement. It is also with great honor and sadness that I am here in the place of Elizabeth Hollander, whom I was fortunate enough to work with in many ways over the years. I and several of us here feel her loss very deeply, and many of us in the field across the country do as well. Although I have not been anywhere nearly as immersed in DePaul's work in community engagement as Liz has been, I have been a great admirer of your work since I was last here in June 2004 as the guest of the Staines Center to give a talk about taking service learning to the next level. And that gave me a bit of pause because I believed that the Staines Center was already doing that and continues to do that and to be a star in the constellation of those of us who are involved in this work across the country and across the world. There is no doubt about it. DePaul has a remarkable history of engagement in Chicago. Your students, your faculty, your staff do important work across the city and suburban neighborhoods, community organizations, schools, businesses, and government offices. Service learning is integrated in 180 courses a year that engage more than 3,400 students in direct service, including 300 nursing students, which is wonderful. The Egan Office of Urban Education and Community Partnership, now part of the Staines Center, which Liz was also part of founding, by the way, engages DePaul faculty and students in grant-based educational partnerships that focus institutional resources and attention on people in distressed situations and communities. DePaul hosts, as Natalie said, Illinois Campus Compact. Your university ministry is just the hub of service to the community. And as I looked over the posters, your students are involved in many ways through both the formal curriculum and in a variety of co-curricular service activities. And I understand that the total numbers of service hours, which we all have to calculate for one reason or another, is very close to 500,000. That's really and truly remarkable. This year, DePaul received the honor of the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching's Community Engagement Classification. So only 361 institutions across the country received that. That's fewer than 9% of the colleges and universities in the US. And DePaul is not new to this highly significant recognition. You also received it in 2006, the first time it was offered. So I could go on, but I'll stop here knowing that more of the terrific work that's going on at DePaul will come out in the student panel and in your table discussions that will follow. So one of the most impressive things about the civic and community work here at DePaul is that it truly embodies the vision of St. Vincent de Paul, who made it very clear that it is not enough to do good, but that it must be done well. And in my conversations this morning, last night with some of you at dinner, it is so clear the extent to which community engagement, civic engagement, we call it a variety of things in the field, is embedded in the very vision, mission, and bricks and mortar of this, and certainly the people of this institution. And it's from someone who's at a large public university that I love. Universities like mine are nowhere near as clear in our mission and vision about this work. So I have mission envy of you right now. I do. So thank you for being here to step away from this work that we do and to look beyond. We're involved in various forms and levels of community engagement here. Although, so this is where I want to start, although I am amazed at the incredible work that you do here and at the work that I see that's being done on campuses and in communities around the world. I'm off to Taiwan in a few weeks, actually, where service learning is vastly growing, and it's wonderful to see that. However, and it's a big however, some of the leading scholars and practitioners in the field believe that civic and community engagement work has stalled on college campuses. Eric Hartman, who is a very thoughtful practitioner of service learning and community engagement, has observed this. We've been doing this civically engaged work for 20 or 30 years. How come we're losing? Why is it that we are a more unjust community, and he's talking about the country, than we were? As for me, I am too optimistic to believe that our work has stalled. However, I really do believe that we as practitioners, those of us who are interested in and care about this vision and this work, we must walk the walk of critically reflecting on this work as we encourage our students to do, and you will hear about that shortly. So many of us who have engaged our students in service learning reflection are familiar with the classic reflection prompt. So what have we done and what have we learned? And so what does it mean? And now what are we going to do about it? I believe that these questions also serve us very well as we reflect on the community engagement that we have begun on our campuses, and especially at forums like this one today. So as a matter of fact, I believe that we must examine, problematize, as my students call it, our work to deeply and critically reflect on its complexities and dilemmas, because it's not just like teaching French from the textbook. My degrees are in French language and literature. For many years I taught je m'appelle, tu t'appelles, il s'appelle. It's either right or it's wrong. It's not that way in the world of community engagement. So in order to really advance our practice in ways that will allow us to reap its potential benefits for students and communities, we really must grapple with what I think are some tough questions. As Natalie mentioned, or Jen mentioned rather, my newest book called Service Learning Essentials, Questions, Answers, and Lessons Learned was published earlier this year. I'm honored that the foreword was by your own Jeff Howard. After doing many workshops, addresses, and consultations on service learning and civic engagement, I felt the need to compile the questions I'm asked over and over again, from the simplest, like, what is this work about, to the most complex, for the faculty, staff, and students who are new to the work, who jump right into its difficult dilemmas, as well as those of us with lots of experience who really find it valuable to go back and revisit its basic principles and best practices as we develop new experiences, both again in the curriculum and outside the curriculum. For those of you who are relatively new or brand new to this work, I'm not going to tell you all what exactly service learning and community engagement are all about, or how to go about designing a high quality course or experience. You have the Stain Center for that. That's what they do. And they do it very, very well. So instead, I would like to share with you some thoughts regarding some of those questions that I believe we must address if we are going to move our work forward to shape its direction and sharpen its focus and continue to achieve some of the benefits for both campuses and communities that the students and the posters, if you haven't looked at them, please do that they are describing. So without a clear vision or focus, we risk the potential of just doing, or worse yet, fulfilling the prophecy that our community engagement work has stalled. So in sync with St. Vincent de Paul, I am very well aware that when our work is not done well, community engagement can have unfortunate effects on both students and communities, such as reinforcing stereotypes and perpetuating the view that service alone is the most effective way of addressing social issues. And so I'd like to engage with you in exploring 3 questions from Service Learning Essentials and how they apply to our work in community engagement. So here is the first question I'd like us to grapple with today. How can participation in community engagement enhance students' understanding of and appreciation of differences in race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, of power and privilege, and systemic oppression? So I'm sure that many of you recall with the great hope that we thought we were entering into an era of a post-racial America with the election of Barack Obama as president to his first term in 2008. Well, you know as well as I do, and I am very near Baltimore, that this hope has surely not become a reality. The question here then becomes, how can the work we do in community engagement help students close their textbooks, step outside the campus walls, and really explore, engage with, even collide with the complexities and consequences of poverty, race, power, and their relationship with citizenship? So let me offer some strategies for us to continue as we, or for us to consider rather, as we continue to shape our work. So the strategies are developing a social change orientation to our work, working to redistribute power, and developing authentic relationships. I am grateful to Nia Mitchell and Novella Keith, by the way, for their inspiration for these strategies. So incorporating an intentional orientation to social change in our work really actually may lead us to rethink the types of activities in which we engage with students. It leads us to organize projects and assignments that really challenge us to investigate and understand the root causes of the social problems and the courses of action of social problems and the courses of action that are necessary to change the structures that perpetuate those problems. So this may involve placing emphasis on developing and expanding the resources in the community in addition to enhancing the learning and development of students. I know you do that in your work here, but we can always take it further. And so what about, do we reach beyond students to include community members in skill development in such areas as problem solving, critical thinking, and communication skills? We may also need to look outside traditional organizations and nonprofits. And again, I know you are ahead of the curve in doing some of that here, to partner with groups that are actively and intentionally working to change structures and systems. And we need to provide opportunities for our students to critically analyze their work and to learn about how to use the levers of social change that are available to them as citizens. Reflection should focus on the big questions such as the relationship between social and economic disparities and problems like hunger and homelessness, why they continue to exist, what are the social structures and systems, again, that perpetuate them, and what might it take to begin to dismantle them. Preparation, we talk a lot about preparation for community engagement. We don't just dive right in with our students. Preparation is critical, but it should include careful consideration of the proposed activities, what we have in mind, to be sure that they are not the acts of false generosity that Paulo Freire claims validate the status quo by actually perpetuating the need for service. As Freire says, if I do for you, serve you, give to you, that creates a connection in which I have the resources, the abilities, and the power, and you are on the receiving end. This is not what St. Vincent de Paul had in mind when he talked about doing good well. So while benign in intent, having an I can do for you orientation really ironically disempowers the receiver and grants further power then to the giver. So it's certainly not always the case, but many of our students may have more privilege in terms of race, class, ability, educational level than some of the people they encounter in the community settings. This implies that we must not engage students in community-based experiences without challenging, not only acknowledging, but challenging those unjust structures and systems that are responsible for these differences. So what are some ways? How do we do that? How do we challenge these embedded systems and structures? Well, one way is to develop the kind of long-term transformative community partnerships that I'm going to talk about in the next question. We can engage students in experiences that really intentionally, I use that word intentionally a lot, recognize that knowledge and understanding can be developed in many ways from many sources, and that the community is a very rich source of knowledge. And students can actually, why not, work alongside community members in advocacy and even direct, dare I say, direct protest work. We can also prepare and support students in developing and sustaining authentic relationships with community members. So an important factor to keep in mind here is neither to ignore social inequities nor attempt to artificially homogenize all people. Well, we're really all the same. We know that that's not true. So for students to form relationships, trusting relationships with community partners, we really need to acknowledge the power relationships or differences that may exist, work to address those injustices and inequalities as we create a shared agenda. And preparation for community work should include both students and community members, as I'd mentioned, in many ways, to learn to speak each other's language, to establish ways to meaningfully interact, to build trust, and to acquire together the knowledge and skills necessary to move ahead. And so this brings me to my second question that I'd like to engage with you about today. And here it is. What are the campus community partnerships of the future? DePaul's work is deeply embedded in community relationships, as I'd mentioned, across the city and suburban neighborhoods. But I do wonder a lot about how we can take that further. And so I've asked myself many times, what are the campus community partnerships of the future? So I'd like to muse with you a little bit about that. Because most higher education institutions, certainly DePaul, are deeply embedded in their communities and rich in human, intellectual, and physical resources, if not financial ones, we are uniquely posed to serve as anchor institutions in our community. Serving as an anchor institution in Chicago is a pillar of your Vision 2018, which I found, and also I was delighted to see a goal of your Student Government Association, something I have not seen before. And DePaul's community engagement work has long been based in asset-based community development, and that's terrific. So what I'd like to home in on here is how partnerships for service learning, although they may begin with very well delineated boundaries, a small number of participants and finite goals need set really no limits on future growth and duration. So what can that look like? So I'd like to share with you a model that operationalizes what this kind of transformation looks like from both the community and the university perspectives. It was developed by my colleagues, Sandra Enos and Keith Morton, and it was in my 2003 book, Building Partnerships for Service Learning, and certainly is in Service Learning Essentials as well. So they developed a framework that distinguishes between transactional and transformative partnerships, believing that partnerships really can move beyond getting things done to transform individuals, institutions, and communities for the better. And so here is a look at their framework. So the next 3 slides will show the differences between transactional relationships and transformative ones. So transactional relationships are those that are instrumental. They're designed to complete a task with and don't necessarily have a plan for the future. And that's okay. The parties engage together because each has something that the other finds useful. So the role of the partners in a transactional relationship is to be good managers of people, processes, and things. The project supports the existing goals of the partnering organizations. The work of the partnership exists well within the organizational structures of the institutions, the community and the university, and there's really no move to change the identity of the institutions or the ways in which we do our business. The commitment of the partnership is well defined, though limited, and limited in terms of time, personnel, and resources, well defined, to the specific project at hand. So no change is expected. Little disruption generally occurs in the normal work of the organizations. So, on the other hand, in a transformative partnership, the focus is on ends beyond getting things done, beyond the utilitarian. There's a significant rise in, I'm sorry about that, in shared aspirations. The partners view their roles as multidimensional and may seek to address the complex social issues that led to the very need for the transactional partnership. So viewing themselves as leaders rather than managers, the partners may question and challenge existing institutional goals and practices and how they do business. As a result, new values, priorities, and practices emerge, and the partners are open to the collaborative creation of knowledge and work. As far as the scope of commitment, the work of a transformative partnership engages whole institutions and occurs on multiple levels, which certainly happens here. Students as well as faculty and staff engage in real partnerships with communities. So participants from all levels can actively engage, and fluidity among levels that disregards, sometimes even disregards, existing hierarchies can occur. So let me give you a quick example of how this can happen, how a single course can then become or transform itself into a real transformative partnership. So it began several years ago with a faculty member in what was then the Department of Health Education. He met with members, with community members and leaders of a city just inside the state of Maryland from the Capital Beltway, so right on the border with Washington, D.C., a community of very high poverty and a high concentration of African Americans, a vast majority below the poverty level. So he worked with the community leaders and said, would you be interested in having us conduct a community health survey in the community? And they said yes. So the students worked with community members and leaders to develop the survey. They conducted the survey. They found some, no surprise, hypertension, diabetes, obesity is some of the issues. And then they proceeded in future semesters, this faculty member and his students, to conduct a series of workshops with the community. So what happened? More and more departments within the University of Maryland, and certainly within what was then called the College of Health and Human Performance, got involved, nutrition, kinesiology, a whole variety of others. And the partnership continued to grow and expand, to the extent that the college, which was then the School of Health and Human Performance, transformed both its mission and its name to become the School of Public Health. And now, the latest development is that the county, it's Prince George's County in Maryland, in which both the city of St. Pleasant and the University of Maryland are located, has joined with other communities, with the University of Maryland and with our medical school in Baltimore, to create a whole plan for transforming health in the entire county. So wonderful, absolutely remarkable. So what I would like to, I want to really quickly present a third question and a few perspectives. This is one that I've done less work on, so I'll leave it to you to do some conversation about this in your table groups. But the question is, and this is a very real and live one in the work of community engagement today, and it is, how can we help students develop a global perspective through local community engagement? Is that even possible? So there's no doubt that international service learning is one of the fastest growing dimensions of our field. And as both service learning and study abroad are growing, more colleges are developing programs that combine these two high-impact educational practices. Now, almost every institution's mission statement, if you look at them, includes some language about global learning, educating students to be global citizens who are prepared to understand, live successfully within, and provide enlightened leadership to a diverse, divided, and increasingly complex world. But we really need to think about, what does it mean to live successfully within a diverse world? What, in fact, is enlightened leadership? And shouldn't we really be doing well in our own communities? Our own communities of need? So, I have had community members in my own community and other university communities that I have visited ask me, so why do you take your students to Latin American countries, Central American countries, to do short-term service projects when we have many members, immigrants from those communities living literally within a mile, practically within the shadow of the University of Maryland. So why do you take all that money? I mean, one of our recent international trips, an alternative break, it cost students $1,800. So community members have asked me, why don't you spend the time and energy here? And there's no question that there's virtually nowhere in the U.S. without an immigrant population. Immigrant communities are rich in ethnic community and ethnic, cultural, and language diversity. They are often in very close proximity to our campuses and could provide profound intercultural experiences for our students without the expense of international travel. We also know that global problems such as homelessness, hunger, educational inequality, disease, environmental degradation are also domestic problems. So as a result, I think what we really need to do is to closely examine our desired learning outcomes for our students in the process of designing and implementing new and revising existing service learning experiences, and consider whether they may be able to be achieved through work in local communities. It's a question. Local communities are far more accessible for students for whom international travel may be challenging in terms of expense, time, other responsibilities. I know many DePaul students work, so again, a real question. So to date, there is very little research that compares student learning from community engagement abroad versus domestically, or regarding whether programs distant from the campus versus those that are locally based yield better results for the communities involved. We just don't know. The results of the emerging studies are conflicting, so we need additional research that explores these issues to shed light on the question of whether the primary focus, never needs to be exclusive, but whether the primary focus of community engagement in fact should be local or global. So those of you who are looking for thesis and dissertation topics or are looking to inspire your students to do some research, please have at it. So I'd like to, before we have some questions, I'd like to quickly conclude with two quotes that I often use in my own reflection and in reflection with my students. So one is from the very well-respected educator and theorist of critical pedagogy, Henry Giroux. And there we go, sorry. Here's his quote. Higher education is one of the few public spaces left where students can learn the power of questioning authority, recover the ideals of engaged citizenship, reaffirm the importance of the public good, and expand their capacities to make a difference or to do good well. And then on the individual level, from the late great singer-songwriter Pete Seeger, you could be the grain of sand that turns us in the right direction. So thank you very much. And I am encouraging and hopeful for some questions and conversation. Okay. Oh, sorry, yes.
So what was the answer to why go abroad? Why go abroad when there's so much need in the country?
Well, we don't necessarily know the answer to that question. Who could say that going abroad, even as a traveler, but much more so as someone who engages with the community, is not a life-changing experience? And students will tell us that. They'll come back from study abroad and say, "Oh, it changed my life." But then the question becomes, how? What is it that you learned? And again, those, so what did you learn? So, so what does it mean? And now what? And now what difference is it going to make for you? We don't know the answer to the question. And I would love for you to be able to talk about that at your tables. Of course, me being the optimist, I believe in both and. We should offer both types of experiences to our students. And there are communities abroad that many universities, mine and certainly I'm sure DePaul, have long ongoing relationships that are definitely mutually beneficial. So there's no reason that we have that a place like Maryland or DePaul has to choose. But I think but to grapple with which one, the local or global, fits a particular course or experience better is something that we should have as an open question. Yes, please.
I said the name right.
There you go, Drew, yeah.
I guess what's so striking to me about that quote is it's just a knee-jerk reaction, but higher education is so out of reach, even in the public realm at the University of Maryland or University of Illinois for students, at least the students that we serve at the organization where I work, that I really question if that's actually, I wonder if that's really the place where questioning authority can sit, and who is questioning authority when higher education is less accessible than really ever before, or at least in my lifetime. So I guess that's just maybe less of a question and more of a reaction that I have as we sit in an institution of learning that certainly has students, a diverse body of students, but still has a great cost that is just not accessible to the authority that I think we need to be questioning.
Well, and yes, I mean, I think that this is an aspirational quote. These are his words, but I might say higher education has the potential to be. And I think we do have that potential. To what extent the community feels a part of DePaul. I mean, you are more urban than we are. I don't know how many of you have been to my suburban campus, but I very often encounter people who live in the city of College Park, which is right up against us, who have never, ever been on the campus and don't see it as a public space. We are trying very hard to change that perception. And there are a variety of ways that institutions do it. I mean, there are universities that offer library privileges to community members that hold, and we have within the last 10 years now built a performing arts center on the campus that is aimed particularly at bringing community members into onto the university campus. And we offer some pretty darn controversial and provocative forms of performing arts there. So I think there are ways that we can do that. I think the question then for us at a forum where we're talking about the future of this work is how do we do this? And making higher education more accessible is certainly one of those. There are some interesting proposals that are floating around out there free tuition to community college. Bernie Sanders is talking about free college tuition for everyone. Those are not necessarily the best answers, but we need to be grappling with those issues. So thanks for raising it.
Yes, can you hear me? Can everybody
Yeah.
hear me? The questioning authority, and I think that's a good point. And as I look at that, how to question authority, and I think there's a way to question authority, and part of it goes deeper than I think I've heard you say something about skills. I have some background in rehabilitation counseling and education and working with students with disabilities, as well as children that I have adopted out of the system. These children are, they come from traumatic pasts. So the way that they generally question authority is through the anger and resentment sometimes that they feel. So how do we empower them to re-own that part of themselves that they lost, to help them to understand that there's a way to question authority with love, respect, honor, and nobility, the way that we used to see them do in the courts when they had the wigs on, kind sir, gentle ma'am, respecting that authority, understanding their posture, and yet knowing that they are somebody as a human being.
Well, I'm not sure I can answer that very profound question in a way that would be that would say other than I think to explore with our students what authority is and what it means to question it. And beginning at a very early age. Because if students in the K-12 system, so those of us who prepare teachers, as we do at the University of Maryland, becomes very important to prepare teachers to begin that process early in education, to begin students' involvement in the community early. I mean, we were the first actually state to have a 75-hour requirement. We were talking about this last night for graduation from a Maryland public high school. And that can be a wonderful way to begin to have students understand what it means, and that education is not all about listening to authority but questioning it and what that means. But it depends how effectively that work is done. So you raise a very profound question, one of the many that this work this work brings to the table. I think Jen is going to tell me we're out of time for questions, but I hope that you will consider all of the questions that have been raised here, the three very provocative, thoughtful questions that have been raised here in your table conversations following the student panel. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you so much.